Welcome to Most Writers Are Fans, the podcast that explores the intersection between writing. Wait, let me start the recording so that I actually have a recording of this. Most of the podcast episode. Welcome to Most Writers Are Fans, the podcast that explores the intersection between writing and fandom. My name is Terry Bartley, and I'll be your host. Today, I'm coming to you live from the Haunted Bookshop in Mobile, Alabama.
That's right.
And I'm joined by the owner of the shop, who's also an author herself, Angela Trigg. So how are you doing today, Angela?
Well, I'm doing great, thank you.
So what has it been like being like this year and Pride and all those things?
This year's been great. This is our first year in our new location. We opened in 2018 around the corner, and then we moved in here in the summer last year, and so we're experiencing all of our firsts in our new space. So this was our first Pride art walk in our new place, which was actually ground central for all of it because the parade started right there. So it was really awesome being in the middle of all that.
Oh, very cool. And business has been good, all those things?
Oh, yeah.
You feel good about where you're at?
Oh yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, so I have been driving around the country. So that is how I have been. I just got done. I stayed with my sister who lives in Florida for 3 days. So that was a nice
Where in
break.
Florida?
Just south of Orlando.
Oh, okay.
So I'm from West Virginia, and I drove down to Florida, stopping at various bookstores along the way, and then I came back up. And this is my first show today, because I have two shows today.
Where are you going next?
New Orleans after this.
Oh, where?
What is it? So Tubby and Coos is this queer-owned mobile bookstore.
I was just there last night.
And they're
I'm
doing
excited.
a book fair at Miles Tap Room and Brewery.
Okay.
This has all been thrown together for me, so, so I'm trying to remember things. But yeah, so they're doing a book fair that I'm kind of like the center of. So I'm actually pretty excited about it.
Oh,
It's going to
cool.
be this evening at 6, but also I'm getting used to time changes because I think it's actually at 5 your time.
No, we're in
But-
the same time zone.
But I'm not.
Oh, okay.
I just crossed into Central Time.
Okay.
So that has been a new experience. Like I woke up this morning and it was 7:30 your time, but then my clock in my car's at 8:30,
Oh, okay.
and it was I wanted to sleep not as long, and I was like, but I probably should because I have 2 shows today. So it's been a whole thing to get used to this.
Oh, wow. Well, tell Candace I said hey, because I know Candace from Tubby and Coos.
Yeah, I will for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna take a quick break. When we get right back, we'll talk into Angela about her writer's journey. All right, so there would usually be like music or a break or something, but because we're here, we'll just go straight into it.
Okay.
Welcome back to Most Writers Are Fans. My name is Terry Bartley, and I am joined once again with Angela Trigg. So, Angela, let's talk a little bit about like your journey as a writer. Like, what got you into it? What made you write to begin with?
Actually, funnily enough, it's due to my grandmother, who's the one who started the original haunted bookshop here in Mobile in 1941 with Cameron Plummer. And she had just passed away, and I was driving down, I lived in Atlanta at the time, and I was driving down to Mobile, and I had an idea for a mystery novel that would star my grandmother. And so I just started brainstorming it, and I was like, oh, I'm not a writer. But that idea just kept bugging me so much, I just kept going with it. Well, that book is still under the bed. I did finish it. I did NaNoWriMo with that one. But the bug had started, and so then I also have always loved time travel stories, and so then the next NaNoWriMo, I was like, oh, what can I do? And I was always fascinated by Ada Lovelace, and so I decided to write a time travel around where my heroine goes back and meets Ada Lovelace, and so then that started my writing stuff. Yeah.
So everything that I saw, like every article about you that I saw credited you as a romance writer, but it sounds like you're a bit of a jack of all trades. Is that
No,
accurate?
actually, aside from the first book that I wrote, which was a mystery novel, everything else since then has been romance.
So you would identify as romance novels.
Yes.
You just happen to have written some other
Yes.
stuff early
Yeah.
on. What drew you in that direction?
Oh, I think I'd always been drawn to, like whenever I would read a non-romance book that ended sadly, I would always rewrite the ending in my head to have a happy ending. And it's just such a positive, affirming genre, and so I thought, well, let me try it. You know, I love reading them, so I thought, well, let me try writing them. So then that's what drew me to it. But I love being able to explore positivity and love and having all that sort of being affirming instead of doom and gloom.
Yeah, I think
We have enough of that in life.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time because, especially for books now, because like it feels like everything has a bit of spice in it these days. And do you feel like that's like, does that make sense to you that we're in that place, or are you surprised by it?
I'm not thought about whether or not I'm surprised by it. I think it's great.
Because I feel like 10 years ago it wasn't, right?
Yeah. I think certain things like, of course, 50 Shades of Grey made it more mainstream and acceptable to be able to talk about it, and I think that kind of probably helped open the door for that, so to speak. I think it's great at being able to be healthy about that kind of part of our lives.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about like some of your books that you would like. What would you like to talk about of your books? You could talk about early ones. You could talk about recent ones. Whichever one you want to.
So most of mine, I have a series, must-love series. It's all time travel romances. So they go down. I love history. I'm a huge history buff, and so this was my chance to explore different parts of history. So one of them goes back to Regency England. Another one goes back to 13th century Wales. Another one are two sisters who go back to an early Jacobite revolution in Scotland. And then I have another series with Entangled, first book, and that one goes back to like 160 AD in Scotland. And then I have a series of contemporaries, sports romances where the heroes play Gaelic football. Actually, they play hurling. I had originally written it as a Gaelic football story, and then I upped it to hurling because it's a little tougher. But I used to play Gaelic football, so I kind of drew on all that experiences. And then the only other one I wrote was a steampunk one that's actually set in Mobile.
So I hear a lot of like UK influences. Is that a fair thing to say?
Probably.
Where do you think that comes from?
I think that's what I was reading too. I mean, I love that. I love that history, the one set here is an exception for that. Yeah.
What made you want to write one for here?
As I love Mobile, and I just wanted to explore that. I explored if Lincoln hadn't gotten shot, how different would the South have been after the Civil War? So I reimagined Mobile with that in place. That particular part of history changed.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's just sort of go down that mind track now for a bit. So are you thinking like the idea is that there'd be a stronger leader after Civil War, so maybe it would have been implemented more like walk me through it a bit.
In my picturing of it, I pictured having that all of the. I mean, we still have a long way to go with black-white relations, but I imagined it that it would have started sooner, like maybe even 70 years sooner than it did. So I kind of backed up the timeline for a lot of things to being earlier, and then had Mobile also the World War II industry that World War II had, where we were building warships. I had that earlier where we were, because of us building the Hunley for the Civil War, I had Lincoln having Mobile be a hub for building submersibles and submarines for the federal government. And so having that kind of industry earlier in Mobile's history.
Yeah, that's very cool. And, just imagine a world where civil rights happened just after the Civil War.
Yeah.
Like, that would have been very cool.
Yeah.
And think of where we'd be now.
Yeah.
And was it set in modern, but in this reimagined?
No, it was set in because it's been 7 or 8 years since I wrote it, so now I'm forgetting what year, but it was late 1800s. And I also pictured she was a reporter, and I modeled her after Nellie Bly, and there was a Jack the Ripper murders going on in Mobile, so she was trying to solve those murders. So that was the backdrop.
So something that fascinates me as a writer is the research that we have to do to write stuff. Like, I'm a fantasy writer, so a lot of it is like I made this up, so like I don't need to research it. But then there's a ton of stuff that I do have to research, especially like cultural things and stuff like that. What kind of research? You said you do a lot of history stuff, so you probably do a ton of that, right?
Oh yeah. So before I even start writing, I'll do a bunch of research. Even if I feel like I'm familiar with that era, I don't want to make assumptions. In fact, that's when you get in trouble. Like, I knew a lot about Jane Austen and Ada Lovelace, and so I was going from memory, and then I'm like, oh wait, that was wrong because I was going from memory. So even if it's something you're familiar with, you still need to kind of go back and check your sources and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I do a ton of research beforehand, get immersed in that world, and then start shaping it.
Do you feel like you have to do a lot of like when you do the one for Mobile, do you do a lot of research specifically in like city structure and things like that?
I didn't get so much into that. No, I didn't actually. I knew a lot about.
I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah, I was writing an alternate history on that, and so I kind of let my imagination fly with having, because I had cruise ships like we do here, modern day era. I had cruise ships that were also submarines because that was such a part of the steampunk world.
Yeah.
And, so I do research on that kind of stuff, but not mobile structure. Yeah.
So whenever how do you come with your character? Talk a little bit about that.
Oh.
So your first book based on your grandmother, correct?
Yeah, that was for unpublished one. It comes out of, for each one's different. So sometimes the character comes first, and then some I do the research and I just kind of journal. And so I'll write, going, well, what if this is, what if this was their background, or what if they were doing this, and what if, and so sometimes just the process of handwriting out, like as if I'm that character, and writing out like as if I'm exploring my own psyches, but it's the characters. That a lot of times elicits a lot of stuff in background material that helps them go, oh, well then that would do this and this. But it's been different for every book. I mean, has it been for you that way too?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting to think about characters because I've been doing a ton of promotion for this book over the past few months, and a lot of like interviews will say like, can you describe your main character? And the truth is, if you have a fleshed out character, it is hard to describe them because, like I described it this way in an interview once, which is like, like there's characteristics that I started with, right? Like this person's smart, and this person gets angry easily, or whatever. But then, like once they get fleshed out, it's like, how do you describe your best friend to somebody? You know?
Yeah. And then you can also start missing them too. Have you ever had a book slump afterwards when it's a public? Oh yeah, you're about to get so you're about to experience that. So you get a book slump afterwards where you just kind of, it's almost, have you ever been in a play? Mm-hmm. So you know that feeling after the play ends, and you miss that that rush and that energy, being around all those people in that particular world, and being immersed in it, and then all of a sudden it's gone. You'll have that experience after the book launches. Yeah.
So right now I'm writing. So it's a whole weird thing with this book. So this book is a short story collection. The following book, I'm going to be doing a series of light novels, so like the manga-looking novels. I'm going to first of all break this book up into two. That way, there's like easier, cheaper versions to buy it. But then I'm going to do 4 additional characters, like featuring them, and then my novel, which is set in this world, comes out the following summer.
Okay.
So like it's a very long, extensive plan. But like right now, so I wrote this, like I wrote a bunch of women in this first book, and like a lot of like interesting like fantasy stuff. And now I'm writing a book about like a changeling who's like in this like secret assassin society, which is like very fun and cool. But I really miss like the fun banter, of the of the earlier characters. Is that the kind of thing you're?
Yes, you'll miss that. And if you want, you can channel that into doing some extras that you send to your fans, in your newsletter and that kind of thing. But yeah, you'd miss having those characters and interacting with them and having that banter if they had it. Or
yeah, because this. I always had a lot of fun kind of like developing the world around them, like who are their friends and family, who's the people in their life, who are they meeting to do this thing or whatever. And with this character, it's very like insular because like he's every character basically, because he's a shapeshifter. Yeah. And then like there are obviously people around him, but like I'm focusing on this character, and it's so interesting and different, but also like I feel like it's fun, but in a different way.
Yeah, that's good.
So are you writing anything now?
Actually, I'm not. When I started the bookstore, it's taken up so much of my time, but I am moving in that direction. In fact, I just had a little seed start the other day where I started researching some books that I need to go ahead and start ordering to kind of immerse myself and see what kind of story might come out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with that because I've been writing this book, the one I was talking about, for the past 4 or 5 months because it's a short book, but I've been very busy. Turns out when you book a book tour by yourself, it's not like you don't have a ton of free time.
I would imagine that.
So like I've been trying to find time for writing, but like, if your brain is like mentally stressed out and tired, like you can't just make yourself right.
And then also my brain is such where I get hyper focused on something, and then everything else sort of. And right now for the last 4.5 years, it's been the bookstore, and so I'm kind of nervous about delving into that world again, getting lost in it, and then having the bookstore suffer. So I'm trying to make it where I have my office at the house, and so then it's sort of a separate thing where it's a clear delineation. Hopefully that'll help my brain.
Yeah, no, I get it. I'm a teacher for my day job, and I decided early on I wasn't going to grade at home because, I feel like if you're a teacher, it's easy for that job to become your entire life, which also I used to own a comic shop, so I fully understand as a shop owner also that can be your whole life if you let it.
It is, and I, unfortunately.
And I think it's important to like figure out where those lines are so that you're not just fully like that job is your identity. So and I mean like, so what did you do before, like for your day job, before you were a bookshop owner?
Actually, I worked at a bookstore. So, and before that, I was, when I started writing, that was when I was at a bookstore. Technically, actually, I just moved to Mobile, and that was, I started writing that mystery novel, then I moved to Mobile, and then I was working at a Bienville Books, which was in the old location where we used to be. So then when he closed that store, I opened this one. But before that, I was, my brother and I had a web design company, and then before that, I was a director of a small local history museum outside of Atlanta. So I've had lots of different jobs.
And had you been writing like bits and pieces?
No, I would like most of my life. I'd always come up with different ideas, mostly in sci-fi, ironically. And I'd be like, oh, that would be so cool. That would be a great book, but I'm not a writer. And so I just let it, fly away. And I would always keep doing that because I had in my head that you had to be able to perfectly, from the get-go, if you were a writer, it meant that you had golden words coming out of your mouth right from the get-go. And I didn't. And so I thought, oh, well, then I'm not a writer. I actually, James Scott Bell's book was what convinced me to try it because in there he said that 90% of writing is craft. And I can learn. I'm good at studying and learning. And so I just devoted myself to learning the craft. And I felt like I had the creativity, like the other 5-10% is your creativity, and I had that. I just didn't have the craft. And so I would say that to anybody who's an aspiring writer, it feels like they don't have the craft, you can learn it.
Honestly, the thing that is so like confusing and frustrating, and I think hard to start in any creative field, is you kind of have to think until you make it a bit. Like if you've decided to be a musician or a writer or whatever, you have to like know that you're good. You know what I mean? And like even if you don't believe it, you have to like know it deep down. Otherwise, like what's the point, right? And it's a weird thing where you just have to like decide one day, like I am a good writer and I should do this.
Yeah, though you always get plagued by that whole imposter syndrome thing, which I think is healthy though too. But yeah, that's imposter syndrome is a thing for sure.
Do you feel like it's been creeping up at all recently?
No, because I haven't really been immersed myself in that world yet.
So these days you're feeling pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you feel like that distance helps, like from actually doing it?
Yeah, though I do. What I probably want to do is reread some of my work now that I've had distance from it for years now, 4.5 years. So I need to reread some of my stuff and just see how, with that kind of distance, how it holds up.
And I will say what's interesting for me, and hopefully you've had similar experiences and I'm not just like humble bragging right now, but like oftentimes when I'm writing it, I feel like it's not where I want it to be or whatever. And then after I edit it and then I go back and then I like leave it because I've been busy promoting it, whatever. Then I go back and read it and I'm like, oh, this is actually pretty good.
Yeah, it can surprise you like that. Or came up like how Facebook does those memories, and one came up recently that had an image that I had made with a quote from the book and in that background image, and I was like, oh, that was pretty good. I wrote that. I didn't even have any memory of that line, and I was like, oh wow, okay.
Yeah, the thing happening most recently for me is the audiobook just got finished, so the narrator's been sending me like samples to approve, and like I teared up once listening to one of my own chapters, and I was like, how does this happen?
Yeah, I thought that happened. It was also when the narrator was, and I had a really good narrator, Mary Jane Wells, and she, I actually write under a pen name. Actually, it's Angela Quarles, not Angela Trigg, but Mary Jane Wells.
That would explain why I could never find.
Yeah. So Mary Jane Wells is an excellent narrator. She just got my books, and when she was, I had gotten so tired of my first book, the one that first published book. By the time I was actually listening to her edit, her and going through the edits, I laughed again and like cried and that kind of thing. So it was amazing to hear it in a different medium.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes, Because I mean, obviously, you need an editor, right? That you can't not have an editor because you need someone to look at it that's not you. Like, you're too close to it. You can't judge it yourself.
Yeah.
But also, like, I think after all that, like, you have to just give yourself some time and not do anything with it so that you can come back and appreciate it later.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break. Then when we come back, we're going to talk about networking with bookstores and how to get your book into bookstores, all those cool things.
Sounds great.
All right, we'll be right back. Okay, so again, in the real podcast, there'll be a break here, but we're just going to keep going.
Okay.
Welcome back to Most Writers Are Fans. My name is Terry Bartley, your host, and we are talking about books and bookstores with Angela Trigg, Angela Quarles, who is a bookstore owner and a romance author, because I feel like she has an interesting perspective in like this intersection. So what has been your experience on either side?
Oh, I remember as an author how hard it was to get my book into bookstores because most of mine were self-published in the beginning, and I would have people, bookstore owners closing the door, or the metaphorical closing the door to me right off the bat. So I experienced that end of it, and then when I was also working in a bookstore, so I kind of got it, but I wasn't owning one, so I didn't quite get it until I actually owned a bookstore. And so it has been a different experience, and it is interesting seeing the whole, I wouldn't say actually that is inaccurate to say seeing the whole picture because I've never been a publisher, but having this kind of a perspective on it has been different.
So let's start with this. What kind of missteps have you seen authors make, like, from your end?
Okay, so one of the biggest missteps is mentioning Amazon when they're pitching me their book. And I think it stems from that there is a perception out there that Amazon is the supplier of books to everyone, including bookstores, and that is not true. They are actually just a reseller like we are. They get their books just like we do from a publisher or a distributor. And so I think that, I was trying to think of where does that misperception come from, and I think it really, it is not from any kind of, I don't know what the right word is there, but it's not an intentional mistake. I think it's just they really honestly are mistaken about how the book industry actually works and where we get our supplies of books. And so if you understand that part, that we get our books from publishers and distributors just like Amazon does, you wouldn't walk into, let's say, Barnes & Noble and tell them, oh, you can get your books from Books A Million. That's a competitor.
Yeah.
Amazon is a competitor. And so that is where the number one problem that authors do is when they're pitching their book, they mention that we can get it at Amazon. It's like, no, we can't. Not unless we don't want to make any money, because we need to be able to buy wholesale, just like Amazon does. We have to buy them wholesale.
Yeah, just to provide a bit of insight to you, which might also like clear it up for other authors, is so if you publish through KDP, which is like the indie press that Amazon runs, you can distribute wide through them, and then they will provide your book wholesale to other distributors.
Exactly.
So that is probably what they are doing. They are probably published it through KDP, and they think that you order it from like a wholesaler that they have, but they don't. They just print it and then they give it to other people. Not give it; they sell it to other distributors.
Yep. Or you can also go on Ingram Spark, and Ingram Spark is a way of publishing your book there, and you would set it at 55% discount, so that we then can buy it at a 40% discount because Ingram Spark, which is Ingram, takes 15% cut, which is fair.
Yeah.
But that's also a misconception where people don't understand. They'll do it at a short discount at like 40, thinking that we're getting the 40%, which is the industry standard. But no, that's actually makes it 20. That's horrible math. But anyway, it makes it a lot less percent that we see on the Ingram side. So our distributor, the only big one left now, is Ingram, and so that's where we order our books from if we don't order directly from the publisher.
Well, honestly, I think it's nice with Ingram because you have more control. Like with Amazon, if you distribute wide, they will provide it to distributors, but you have no control over what the discount is. Which I think as an indie author, like you want to have like some say over like how much money you're going to get, but then also like how much money indie bookstores are going to save. Because I think I think that it just sort of shows respect to the indie bookstores. If you set it low enough that they actually get a discount out of it.
Yeah, so I kind of look at print as if I had actually been with the publisher, I would only be making 50 cents to $1 on any print book anyway. So I don't, that's what I just price mine enough to where if I when I give the proper discount, I'm only making about $1 on a book when I sell it.
That's what I've been shooting for also. And I mean, it sounds crazy because like you want to make more than $1 per book, right? And you also want to like you don't want to like have to get a bunch of returns. Like that's the big thing that I think a lot of people are worried about is like having bookstores return. And maybe talk a little bit about that too, because I think that's useful for authors to know about.
So it depends on if you're really, really trying to go wide with a lot of bookstores nationally. You want to have it set at returnable because a bookstore's not going to take your chance if they can't actually return it. It also affects if you're going to be doing book signings at bookstores. Like I won't take an author to do an event if I can't return their books. So if it's a case where they have it non-returnable, they have to supply their own books, and then we get a cut from when they sell it at the event. So having a returnable really helps your chances in getting in more bookstores. But if you really know like that your book is hyper local and only the people in your area are going to be interested, your local bookstore should carry it anyway, and they won't care if it's not returnable.
Yeah.
I mean, no, there are some bookstores that make a blanket rule. Can't help that. But in general, you want to have it be returnable, but it's not always. You just have to kind of a case by case basis, I guess, on that.
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of this is just kind of like navigating the industry and learning that side of it. But I'm curious. Like, have authors come in here, like, with books in hand, like, trying to sell them to you, like, wholesale?
Or even, I've had them come in, and I say, well, how much is this, how much would I be paying you? And they tell me the price, and I said, so then what's the retail price? And they tell me the same price. I'm like,
you have to make some money.
Yeah, we're a business. We have to be able to have some room in there to make some money, or why are we putting it on the shelves? We're not a nonprofit. We're not a library. And so, I mean, I know that sounds crass, but it's like, that's the reality. I think that's the other mistake.
When you can't make no money on a book.
Yeah. I mean, I will make some, like there's one book that is local that hardly anyone else has written about that aspect of our history. And their discount on Ingram is $0. But I order it and I go ahead and just tack on a couple dollars on it. Again, it's all a case by case basis. But if you're a regular author producing a fiction book, you need to be able to have it priced in the industry. I know one bookstore that talked about how someone came in to pitch their kids' chapter book, which a kids' chapter book is a tiny little book that's about a couple millimeters thick. And it was priced at $24 for a paperback kids chapter book, and it's way, way, way outside of it. Those normally go for $4.99, $5.99. So know your market, know what other books in your industry, in your genre are selling at, and act accordingly. But authors will come in and have done no research on how you pitch a book, and it's going to be different for each bookstore. So my advice is, go to the website of the bookstore you want to be in, look at what their submission process is, and follow it.
And I think that part of it, too, is, like, I think it's good to just meet bookstore owners and not have expectations, you know what I mean? Because, like, whenever I set up this interview with you, at no point did I say, will you please stock my book in your bookstore? Like, obviously, I hope you do, right? But, like, I didn't at any point say that. And I think that establishing, like, I don't care if you stock my book ultimately. I would just like to know who you are so that I can like work with you in the future. Like, I feel like that's a valuable way to approach it. Like, do you think have you responded better to that kind of thing?
And then also just if you're local, being a customer of the store. If you've never ever stepped foot in here and then all of a sudden you're here to, it's like, you obviously read. So where are you getting your books?
Yeah.
But having that sort of relationship building is great. We have a very healthy relationship with our local Writers Guild, and it's been great. I mean, we do things together and have a great synergy. Mainly because I would say, two of my other employees are also authors. So I have a children's book young adult author, and then another one is a historical fiction author. So we get writers.
So talk about it from your end as an author. What kind of things have you done to get your book in bookstores?
I actually,
like, have you like gone out and talked to bookstores?
I did when I, and had that whole thing of like making the same rookie mistakes, so I kind of because I'm non-confrontational. I kind of would let it drop. I did have an opportunity to try to get it in a store from my hometown, which is actually why I asked you where in Sarasota. I mean, in Florida, because I grew up in Sarasota.
I never lived in Sarasota for a long time.
I had an opportunity to be able to have an event at that bookstore there, and then I just let it drop for some reason. I don't know, because I got busy or something. I'm not sure what I did, but anyway, I didn't actually pursue it too hard. I did do the program that Barnes & Noble had, where if you sold a certain amount of ebooks, and they would let you sell in their store, and so I went through that process and got approved for that. And I know when I won the Rita, which is the award, the romance award, I noticed that my book was being just independently bought by a lot of different stores to stock, so that was awesome.
So obviously we both do, because you're a bookstore owner, I'm a person driving 2 bookstores across the country. We do see some value in having your book on a bookstore shelf. Could you sort of talk about that? Because I feel like a lot of authors feel like, because I've seen this advice like online multiple times, which is like, don't worry about bookstores, just sell your stuff online. What do you feel like is the argument against that, like that mentality?
I would say because our readers are different here. So bookstores, the reason I don't see myself as in competition with Amazon, even though they are technically a competitor, is because we're about the experience. And so a reader coming into our store 9 times out of 10 doesn't have a particular book in mind. They want to explore and see and have a book jump out at them that they discovered here. You can't really do that online, and so you might actually, as a lesser-known author, might have a better chance of being discovered by a reader when you're actually in a retail store. Now, that is if you have a stellar cover, a title that just grabs you and you want to go, what is this? You know, and so if you have those going for you already, then I would say for sure being in a bookstore helps you get that discoverability. Now, it's on a smaller scale, but with TikTok now, you know, you just need that one customer to come in and just find your book, and then they're like gushing about it on TikTok, then, you know, boom.
Yeah, then it blows up.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's kind of where I like to, because like obviously I want to sell them at bookstores. Obviously I want to help independent bookstores because, you know, I think small business is important. I think the communities need small business, and I want to be a part of that, right? But also, like, I think as a more like financial crass perspective is like, I think it's good marketing, you know? Like, I think that if your book is on a bookstore shelf, even if they don't buy it at that bookstore, they might buy an ebook or an audiobook or whatever, because it feels more credible, I think, when they see it on a shelf. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and all the knows the marketing wisdom that you have to see it 7 times before you, you know, buy it. So that's, you can count that as one of your 7 times.
Well, and if somebody comes into a shop regularly, they might hit all 7 in the bookstore.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, so I feel like that's sort of how I approach it. Is I think that it's an important marketing tool. I also think, like, obviously, I think it's good to build these relationships. So that like I would love to do events here after I have books to sign, right? Like, it'd be cool to actually know people by name and face, and not just because I had to do like blind emails this time. That is terrifying.
Yeah, I bet, yeah.
And it's rough, especially in these communities that I'm not a part of, to be like, hey, can I come in and do a thing? But I think that doing like this go around where it's kind of like, I'm not actually really promoting anything. I'm just kind of like showing up and meeting people. It's established. Okay. Google Assistant came up for some reason. I'm so sorry. People are watching. And then it was capturing everything we said as a request for Google Assistant.
Oh.
So I don't know what it thought.
Oh my gosh. Did I say the word Google?
No, one of us might have.
Okay.
But it's fine. I caught it quickly.
Okay.
So what are you? So any sort of tips or things or for bookstore owners too? I think that that's maybe useful. Like, what would you tell like bookstore owners about stocking like indie books?
I would say I think they're shooting themselves in the foot by being hardline about not stocking any. Like, there'll be some bookstores that say none whatsoever, and they are just a hardline about it. And I get it. I mean, it's easier just to not deal with something because we have enough on our, I mean, that's one thing I would say to authors. Understand that we owners are sometimes the only one running the shop. So we're not only checking them out, but we're also ordering, buying, blah, blah, blah. Have a lot of hats. I have staff who run the floor itself. but still, I've got a lot of hats to wear. So we're busy, and so I know it's easier as an owner just to, draw a hard line, but I would say you're also losing out on building relationships. And, I know some will say, well, they're not coming into my store, so why should I support them? And I was like, and I know I said that earlier, it's like you would like to see that, but I don't let that be a determining factor. I've never seen you before, that's fine, okay, but maybe they might now, someone's got to give there.
I think there's something kind of cool about being on the ground floor of a new author. You know what I mean? Like, if somebody does blow up, wouldn't you love to say I had their book on my shelf early on?
Yeah, true.
So this is kind of just some inside baseball for a minute. So I emailed a store, and at this point, I wasn't even, I wasn't trying to get a stock. I was just saying hey, I want to do the podcast there, whatever. And the bookstore got back to me and said, they were busy, which I understand scheduling, but then they said that they couldn't stock the book because it was print on demand. Have you seen that? Have you?
Yeah, I mean that's what some won't do if they're print on demand, because most of the times print on demand is non-returnable. So that's where you're running into that there, because print on demand typically.
But it will say if it is returnable,
yes.
Correct?
And some are.
Mine is.
Yeah. Okay. But they might just be like. And I can't really tell. Everybody has their way of running their business, and that's what makes bookstores, indie bookstores, unique, is that each one is going to be different. We're not all cookie cutter, so it's a double-edged sword there,
Yeah, because I was always wondering how much do you see and how much, you know what I mean? Because I never have any idea, because everything's from my end, what a publisher / author sees.
We see a lot of books. So there are between 800 to 1,000 books a day published, and we are getting pushed constantly from publishers and the reps on books that are traditionally published. So, I mean, my email inbox is just constantly, just me sitting here, it's probably now gotten, filled up.
Yeah.
I say filled up as if I don't have 20,000 unread emails on there, but anyway, there's going to be some unread.
Supposed to be 20,000 additional unread emails.
So understand that we get pitched just from publishers a lot. I mean, are constantly looking at catalogs, and then on top of that, you have all the indie authors. And so just make sure that when you do pitch that like you're doing what I said, just go to the website, see how they want to have it pitched. Don't just show up at an event where they're harried and busy with someone else and then talking to them about your book. Do research and find out how they want it submitted, and then pitch it as like a one sheet and talk about where they can get it. And hopefully you say Ingram, and that it's at this, with this ISBN, blah, blah, blah. Don't mention Amazon at all, but then say why you think that book would sell in their store. So in other words, if it's Southern Gothic and you're pitching to stores in the South, that makes total sense. Make sure to mention that, or that it takes place in their city. Make sure to mention that, because if it's a indie author from Nevada pitching me their thriller set in California, nothing against that book. It's like, but why would my reader here want it? Is it speaking about something that's relevant right now? That kind of thing. So you have to be a publicist too. You've got to take off your author hat and then put on your publicist hat and figure out why would that book sell in that store.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to knowing your story and then knowing your audience, right? Because I think that most books could have universal appeal, but you have to be able to articulate that, Because, I mean, even if something is set in a very specific place, it has, you can still, say these experiences are universal, or this is a thing that I, tie it to your personal story. That way it's more compelling.
But I will say, don't, because I've seen this, don't pitch your book saying, my book is better than John Grisham.
Oh, sure.
and you'd be a fool not to carry my book. I mean, that's not the way to pitch a book.
Yeah, I mean, so agents always want, comp titles, right? Do you guys, is that useful for you guys?
Yes. So that would be another way of pitching it, saying this would be, such and such meets such and such, or here's my comps. Just like you pitch to an agent, you're pitching to a bookstore now. So it's the same thing. So you've got to have your query, your blurb, down pat with your tagline. What's going to grab them. If I see a tagline at the top and it sounds intriguing, I'm going to keep reading. But if it's just a wall of paragraphs with nothing standing out, and I'm like, I'm sorry, but I'm just going to delete and move on.
Now that's a really solid tip because I think that a lot of authors probably have their query letters, right? And I think that just sort of like using and there's tons of resources out there for like how to write a query letter. What should you do? What should you include? All these. What makes a good query letter? Whereas there's not a ton of resources for like what makes a good letter to a bookstore. You know, like that's a thing that I feel you kind of have to like figure out for yourself. Which I mean, maybe that's a whole market. Any other non-fiction writers out there that might want to do that? That's maybe something to think about. But there's not a ton of resources for that, and I think that you could use all the things of how to write a query letter and just change it for a bookstore, and that would be totally appropriate. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and then just include at the bottom after your comps, you just include available, at Ingram at such and such discount. And put the ISBN without dashes right there too. Publishers make that same mistake. They won't put the ISBN in there, and I'm like, okay, now I gotta copy paste this title, go into blah blah blah, and try to find it and all that stuff. Put the ISBN in the email.
Yeah, you don't want the bookstore to have to go to Amazon to find the ISBN.
Yeah, or you're also creating more road bumps. You're creating friction. Try to make it as frictionless as possible for the person who's going to be buying it. Hopefully buying it.
All right. So, any final tips for any like rapid fire last things you think keep in mind before?
Just I'll just reiterate. Remember, we're a business, so we need to make a profit. And I know that sounds crass, but that's true. That we don't get our books from Amazon. Don't mention Amazon. And do your research for each bookstore and support indies. We're great.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Angela. This has been really informative. I really have appreciated chatting with you. I think that this is
great.
I think this is useful for not just me, but like any author out there that wants to know more about this. So if people want to find more about you, your books, your shop, where should they go to do that?
So if they want to know more about the shop, they would go to thehauntedbookshopmobile.com, and we ship all over the U.S. And then for Author World, it'd be AngelaQuarles.com. That's ANGELAQUARLES.com.
Very clever. I like the pun. All right. Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate you coming here.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye. No, I'll do a real close later. Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Oh, and bye TikTok. Thank you.